I haven't been this excited about a technology in the go-to-market space in a really long time, and I don't think there's anything that compares to the value that Clay is bringing to the table. Today I have Yash Chakrawarl, Head of Education for Clay, to walk us through a few of the powerful things that Clay can do. Yash, you have a very impressive and eclectic background that I think ties really well with what you're doing at Clay today. I mean, a background in data science, management consulting, being a high school teacher, which sounds like the absolute most terrifying job you could possibly have. And then I love how you've leveraged all of those skills in the tech space with Clay. So just super excited to be going through everything today and what you have to share. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Before we hop in, I think people watching this would just love what drew you to Clay, how you got to Clay, and where you think Clay is going in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a great question. I think, despite the eclectic background in education, data science, and the many, many things, I think a connective tissue for me has been automation. How do we improve the ways in which we work and what we get to work on? I love the ability for people to flex their creative muscles to the max. And I think creative work comes from work that can't be redundant and can't be automated. So I got very deeply into Zapier when it was early. I think Make has really since been on the space. There's tools like Phantom Buster for LinkedIn, Airtable made its own explosion, and there's all these ways that we are trying to enable access to people who don't know how to code to be able to automate the daily mundane things in their own lives. But there's still a technical ceiling to those things. And there's still limitations, right? Like I have to know how to be able to design a workflow software. I have to be able to use the tools that are given to me. And I think a big part of what makes all of that automation really difficult for people still working complex jobs, particularly on the customer side, is the number of different tools you have to connect together. And in today's age with AI, how you actually prompt engineer and put that final piece of the automation puzzle on your entire process. And so I think what Clay over the years has gotten to is really a consolidation not only of all of the most important things for like these few specific functions, mostly sales and marketing, that you need to automate the beginning, most mundane parts of that process. It also, I think, is a place for you to be able to like add that final step with AI and say, hey, this is the part that people don't enjoy doing. I don't think I've met an SDR or BDR in my life that says they love list building or they love uploading lists to data enrichment providers. I don't think anyone likes that, right? We take the parts that are boring about the work, let people put it sort of on autopilot so that everyone can focus on the things that humans should focus on. I think there's a lot of people talking about AI SDRs replacing everyone doing sales and the dystopian future of that. But I think the reality of it is we take the parts that really suck away from humans so that humans can spend more time doing the parts that are really fun, which I think are conversations like this, getting to know people, getting to know their problems, understanding whether or not there's a real fit between the things that I want to provide and the things that someone else might need.
Yeah, I love the optimistic perspective, of course. I feel the same way. I don't think AI is here to wipe out the human race, maybe not yet. And
We'll see.
and it's still in a place where it's difficult to get it to the point to do the job that you need it to do. I think understanding prompt engineering is really important. I don't think a lot of people can intuitively do that. I also think the tech stack, especially for sales and marketing, is really, really complex to manage, and there's so many different tools. So it's not intuitive, and even though a lot of these solutions are no code, it's just not easy to manage. And a lot of them aren't as capable either. So, and that's where I think some of the first instances I got introduced with Clay were some LinkedIn posts where it was very like, hey, here's a workflow that I built and created that got me a couple meetings this week. And it's just super easy, really intuitive, and unbelievably capable. Like, I seriously have not been this impressed by any technology in this space in pretty much forever. So that's why I'm really excited for you guys. And also congrats on the recent Series B announcement. I know that's going to really accelerate your development and what the product's going to be able to do. So I can't wait to see what you built because you've already come so far. So I'm super excited about what's next.
Yeah, me too. I think we were just even talking about it in an all hands meeting today that I think what we're going to be doing with this capital is continuing to make the product better, continuing to make the vision of what we think the ease of this process should look like a reality. Because I still think there's a long ways we have to go, but we appreciate folks like you who've seen what we've done and appreciated the journey up until now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today, I know we have a couple things that we want to go through. One I think would be really good for our audience is just a general demo. So I know there's a lot to cover and a lot of capabilities, but some of the bread and butter use cases of Clay and some of the bread and butter capabilities. And I know you prepped a couple really interesting use cases that I think would be fun to show off what Clay can do too.
Yeah, I'm excited. We can jump through it.
Sure. Well, I'll pass it to you, Yash, and I'll sprinkle in questions as needed, but really excited to take a look under the hood.
Yeah, excited to give you guys a look under the hood. Let's do it. I'll jump in. I'll share screen, and then we can go from there.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay. So let's actually start here. What I often tell people when we're first talking about Clay is that the best way I often hear people sort of slotting it into their minds of the many tools you were talking about, Anthony, is it's kind of like a pre or like a CRM-plus tool. The whole goal of CRMs, like your HubSpot and your Salesforce, is to keep, manage, and track all of this really important, rich information about the people that you're talking to so that you can manage that relationship in a more effective way. I think human beings are built to like manage and understand connections and relationships around 100 to 150 intimate people. But when we're doing sales or marketing type work, we're managing relationships with thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, and trying to jump into the context at each moment is cognitively impossible. Now, what's really hard about the CRM side of that as well, though, is that maintaining and keeping all of that data up to date with the pace at which people move and change and, sort of quit, upgrade, promote different jobs is practically impossible. So there's all these other data tools that people have built or founded. You have your like Zoom Infos, you have your Cognisms, your Hunters, and then people data labs. I could go on and on about the dozens of other data providers who specialize truly only in what is someone's email, what is their phone number, what's their address, what is all the information I need to know about that person at the moment that I'm looking to engage in restarting, adding to, or creating a relationship with them. And so I think because of the evolution of those CRM technologies and sort of data provider technologies in a disjoint way, people have a lot of things in a CRM. They're taking things out of the CRM, enriching them with data providers, bringing it back, trying to do it all over again to increase coverage or accuracy, because nobody, I think, can actually cover all the data in the world perfectly. And it ends up with people having, for lack of a better word, absolute garbage CRMs with data that's duplicated, messy, missing, etc. So the origination of Clay was really to solve that problem. It was the idea that if we think 2 heads or 3 heads are better than one, aren't 2 data providers, 3 data providers also all better than one? So what we do at the core is we have a bunch of integrations with all of the best data providers in different regions and areas for all of the most important data points. You can see sort of the 75 plus different integrations that we have here. And then you can see the many, 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 many data points that you can just get out of the box from all those providers here. And that doesn't even include all of the providers that sort of add more richness and flavor to your data. That think about Anthropic, think about OpenAI, these large AI LLM tools that let you transform, clean, munge, reshape that data in interesting ways. And then there's also all the connections to once I get that data, I can send it back to my CRM. I can send it back to an email sequencer, maybe a LinkedIn automation tool, you sort of name it. So I give all that context before I go into the demo because I think it's important to slot in where this fits in the process of doing outreach to people. And then the other thing that I'll often tell people is I think we're trying to build software that makes SDR and BDR's lives a lot easier and more fun. But often the irony or the twist in that process is that I have seen Clay be most successfully used by RevOps and growth ops teams, not by sales teams. Because I think the actual mentality is that right now, SDRs and BDRs are hired to do sales work. The unfortunate reality of the world that we live in today is that 80% of that job is not a sales job. It is a data job. And that's all of this work trying to update and keep your relationships fresh. I imagine a world in which that sales role is actually 80, 90% sales, 10, 20% data. The reason people like RevOps and GrowthOps often succeed with using Clay to enable those SDRs is because those people have jobs that are 80 to 90% data related. And so those people, I think, are much more naturally suited to and I think appropriate to use the tool because you don't need a team of 90, 100 BDRs using Clay. You need like 1 to 3 really top-notch people who can automate that work for the 90 and 100 people.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because I can validate a lot of this too. So my background is all RevOps, eclectic background of some go-to-market roles before, but fell into RevOps relatively early. And this is the hardest part of the job. So I think a lot of people think like, oh, you have Salesforce, you have ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is going to give you all the data you'll ever need, and you just connect it one-to-one. It's like beautiful thing. Not even close. Like there are so many other data sources that you need to pull in data from, especially if you want to do something relevant with like really good intent signals, or you're in a market that has a really specialized ICP. Pulling all this data manually, scrubbing it, cleaning it in the background is like the type of RevOps work we've had to do so much. And at LeanScale, this is the type of work we are hired to do all the time as well. So we know exactly how messy it can get. And I think you're right. Imagine you have a team of 10 SDRs. You have to not only train them to do the sales side, which is very difficult. Especially these are typically entry-level people, so you have to be able to, train them on all kinds of things. But then you have to train them on how to manage all these tools, which some RevOps professionals have a tough time managing. Yeah. I think it's kind of it's setting them up for failure quite often, and that's why a lot of people are like, oh well, we don't see the value in our SDR teams. They're not producing what we expected them to. It's good, yeah, because you have them doing 3 different jobs at an entry-level position.
And only one of them they were hired for.
Right. So I just love the mission because I know the job is hard enough as is, and if something like Clay can make it easier for an SDR, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think you described it perfectly, Anthony. Like that is part of what makes me so excited to work on this tool here. Like I think imagining a world in which people get to do more of the work that they want to do is super exciting. And like tools for creative growth was sort of the original mission of the company, and I still think we remain very true to that even today. So I think to Anthony's point, what I'll do here is a quick demo. Clay can, I'm sure you can imagine, do many, many, many things. What I will demo is sort of, I think, something that clearly highlights some of the pains that we're solving for. So we're just going to fill out this quick form. And actually, I'm going to use Anthony as an example. So Anthony, it's Enrico.
Yep.
And then, oh, sorry, this is actually asking me for them in separate ways. I built this for a reason this way. Anthony, Enrico, you currently work at LeanScale.
Yep.
Capital S. And that's all I need to fill out here. So imagine this is a form for any company website indicating interest in a product. And I can tell you, think about like OpenAI, think about Anthropic, think about the interest forms you might be able to fill out on those websites. What those types of companies have happening behind the scenes on a form like this today might still shock people because this data goes directly sometimes into a CRM, sometimes it goes through a Zapier if they're more, advanced in RevOps, and then it goes to a CRM after enriching a little bit. And then some companies have email sent, some companies just have BDRs and SDRs dedicated to monitoring new lists in the CRM, but there are literal teams of humans trying to monitor form responses like this, because the most important thing you can do with these types of form responses is be very quick on the uptake for the most valuable people filling out the form. I think the research shows that if you respond in like a somewhat personalized way in the first 3 minutes after this form is filled out, that significantly increases your chances of actually booking, qualifying, and moving down the process of a deal that could be generated. Now, there's a couple of problems there. The vast majority of people filling out this kind of a form, especially let's say it's enterprise, like in this case here, probably not qualified. So you don't want your reps going and actually trying to personalize email follow-ups to every single person filling out this form. What you need your reps to do is go through this form and say, okay, based on the company size, based on the person who's actually filling out the form, whether it's the director of RevOps or just a BDR or an AE, based on the industry the company works in, based on revenue of the company, we probably have a different estimation of how good a fit that company might be for the thing that we're trying to actually give. And so in this case, you need them to first go through, do all that research on a row by row basis, which is time consuming, manual, and frankly boring. Then they need to filter all of the people down to just the ones that actually need a personalized follow up. Then they need to go find the information to personalize that message in some way. So probably go look at bare minimum at the company website, at the company mission, see who, in like our case, the company sells to, and at least say something, again, bare minimum of like, hey, so glad you're interested in Clay. I love what this company is doing. I'm excited to help you hopefully figure out if we can help you reach more people in your ICP. That would be, I consider it like elementary personalization. That's not even advanced personalization. But that takes time and it takes effort to do. I have yet to meet anyone at any company doing this inbound process with less, more, one person or less, and at the speed to lead time that they want. Because everything I just described takes time, effort, and is not the most intellectually stimulating or rewarding work.
Right. And you're sifting through so much garbage, it makes it tough to be like, all right, let me give my whole effort into this one inbound lead that came in.
Exactly. And I think just like the one other side note, because I could just rant about this forever and I'm trying not to, is these forms are also often long. Like you have to ask people for their name, for their email, for their company, and all this other stuff to make sure that that process, the reason these forms get long is because people are trying to reduce the work on the BDR, SDR processing end. If they can get more information from you that's accurate up front, then maybe they can automate more of the rules that filter it on the back end. But we also know the push and pull of the longer a form is, the lower the likelihood that someone actually goes through the time or effort to fill it out, especially if you ask questions that they don't know off the top of their head. So here, I want to also emphasize, all we did was look at full name and company name. And what Clay is coming in here to do is a whole bunch of other things that are at the end going to actually result in Anthony getting a LinkedIn message from me that's personalized in the way that I just described. So these things that we just talked about, right, where first I might need to find Anthony's LinkedIn profile. I'm using an AI-based web scraper, the prompt of which you can see here. And this comes back to kind of what Anthony was talking about earlier today, where prompt engineering is a skill that I think people will need to learn. And I think it will become easier and easier to learn and will get more and more abstract as AI systems get better. But understanding how to speak to AI like it's a third grader, but expect it to give you the output of a PhD student is a natural talent that you have to figure out. And that's kind of how we format these prompts here. We tell it what to do. We tell it what the results for criteria and success are. We need to tell it also what the results for failure are, which is just as important. And then give it the step-by-step process that we would probably be doing otherwise manually ourselves. I don't want to spend my day taking someone's name, their company name, copy pasting it into Google, and then typing in LinkedIn. I have way better things to do with my time, and I bet everyone else in the world does too. That's where I think these AI systems come really in handy. You can see the work it does right here. My favorite thing about this AI web scraper that we've built as well, it gives you its result, but like a really eager to please employee, it also tells you what the reasoning is behind the result. It gives you and shows its work and the steps taken, and you can see its confidence as well. So you can actually build really, really sophisticated, sort of automated manual steps with this type of an agent. And we did indeed find the right Anthony. So then what we do is we take that LinkedIn URL and we extract a bunch of information from it. So I can truly access almost anything that's actually available on the profile. You have to imagine that this varies depending on the privacy level of the profile and how filled out it might be. But from this, I can see that Anthony is the CEO and founder of LeanScale. I can also see he was the VP of Revenue Operations before that. And I've actually extracted here into a cell just all of his previous experience. So I can see at a glance that he was at Boast AI for a bit. He was at LexisNexis, which I actually didn't know until just now. We should talk about that at some point. Emailage, Phoenix Children's Hospital. You too have a very interesting eclectic background, I would say, my friend. And I can get all sorts of things, right? Just from that personalized LinkedIn profile information. Again, this has all happened automatically from that form fill. Now I'm doing a couple of things here to just check that I actually have the right domain to try and find his potential email. And then we get into what was really the bread and butter of Clay before AI really came out, right? Of the world in which I cannot emphasize this more strongly than the way I'm trying to right now. These 6, 7 columns right here on their own, I think automate what was the equivalent of like 1 to 2 hours of work for people and custom systems in a pre-Clay waterfalls world. Because what people had to do is take the data that they had, let's say it's name, company name, and website, upload it to this first data provider, Prospeo, for all the people that they have, get back the result, filter it down to only the results that still weren't found, because your coverage is really important and not every data provider works again. Then you have to re-upload it to the second one and then filter, and then the third one and then filter. And doing that, like no one wants to spend their day uploading and downloading CSVs for a living. There are, again, far more intellectually stimulating things for humans to be doing. And so what we're doing here is automating that process where we will try the first data provider. Only if it doesn't work do we move on to the second, the third, the fourth. And you can see that even just in these 3 rows. When found in the first one, nothing else runs. When not found, the other one runs in Substack. And the other thing specifically about emails that I'll actually just show real quick is we're also validating them with your own sort of choice of email validation on the back end. So if I unhide all these columns, you'll notice that for this first one here, the validate email ran, and because it was found and because it was valid, then we actually put the email in this final validated work email column. If we actually found an email from a data provider, but found that that email domain is invalid, which is often the case when someone has just switched jobs or might just have a different email, or the data provider is just out of date, because I don't think anyone can keep up with the pace or volume of data evolution today. You don't want that fake data or incorrect data in your system. And so we'll actually still mark it incorrect and keep going down the waterfall to try and find the most reliable, accurate email.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it does save hours of work, and also just making sure you have accurate data. It's so important to be able to do this type of work.
Exactly. And again, right, like I just want to keep emphasizing, this has all happened since I just filled out that form. I'm just walking through what happened. Last thing so now we've gotten a bunch of information about Anthony as a person. Let's also get some information about the company that he works at. We know it's LeanScale. We can see that the current employee count on LinkedIn is about 18. We can see the total size ranges 11 to 50. And then I have a few different headcount pieces here that if I wanted to filter for people who work at a company just within these titles, I can do that. So right now, this form is filtered to 3 companies where nobody really has traditional sales titles. So we see nothing. And then the other thing that I can do is look for titles within a bucket that don't have all these other kind of keywords that often bloat headcount on LinkedIn. So I don't want the creators, the experts, the mentors, the advisors who I know don't actually work full-time at a company. Finding accurate headcount, I've discovered, is such an important thing to do for large companies. And LinkedIn is often inaccurate because people will associate themselves with a company that don't actually work at that company.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is like Pavilion. So everybody's part of the Pavilion community, and they put it on their LinkedIn. So it would show that Pavilion has like 10,000 members. I've never even thought about doing that. That's huge.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, and I think that's kind of you can customize the data you want to get in whatever way you can, and then get the data that just you need based on the criteria you're looking for. So like that's something I really like showing people because headcount really matters. Pavilion's a great example, to your point. I think Slack actually has a similar thing as well. So I often tell people, if we think about the processes we're going through of I need to find data, or I need to find people and companies that I want to get more information about. I need to get more information about those people and companies. I then need to write messages to those people and companies, and then I need to sync all that data to my CRM. What we just walked through was the finding, quote unquote. In this case, that was just an inbound form fill, but we can go through the sourcing in a little bit. Then we got a lot more data about Anthony and where he works. Now we're going to move into the writing that personalized copy, where again, I would say for the times where you have reps doing highly creative, highly personalized messages, that's not necessarily what AI is meant for. What AI is really good at is that like pseudo human personalization, or what I earlier referred to as elementary personalization, where
Mm.
all I want the human to do is just go look at the company website, just tell me, what does the company do? Who do they sell to? And write like a simple line based on that. Let's use AI to do that. And then I'll jump into how you can try to use AI after this in like a more personalized way. What I'm trying to do here is scrape the website just like I would tell a human to do, and then tell AI specifically just the kind of formatting of the lines that I want it to personalize. And I am going to quickly emphasize this as well as just what I think is like a general best practice for using AI, no matter what the tool is today. AI is really good at these fixed, discrete problems when you give it a lot of context, because then the output is repeatable and reliable, right? The thing that I think we often forget in the generative AI world is that if you don't narrow down the solution space for a generalized tool to something very specific, what a generative tool is going to give you is generative answers. And 99% of the time, people are trying to use AI for automation in particular. You don't want that much variability in what AI is going to be doing. You want it to be repeatable, predictable, and not sort of just give you these outlier responses. So generating sentences or phrases at a time is far, far more effective than trying to generate whole emails from single prompts. So on that, just to give you an idea here, right, look at how we've put some effort into the actual prompting here for what I'm writing. And I just want to give me the same format every time. I love this company's focus on what the focus actually is. And that's all I really need. And I give it some examples as well. And we can dive into just like a whole video on prompt engineering at some point if people would like. I think that's very timely these days.
Yeah, this is
But
great because I see a lot of people would be like, hey, write me an intro email to this company. And then you don't know what it's going to pick up or exactly what it's going to say. But I love that you can narrow the focus so you can automate it. Because right now I don't, I think a lot of people are not comfortable just letting it loose and letting it fully automate something because they're worried about what it's going to provide. But I
yeah.
like how you can narrow the focus here and then keep repeating that same task over and over again.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Anthony, people are right to not want to use AI because it's unpredictable in certain situations. But I don't think the extra step people sometimes realize is that you can control AI. You just need to put a few more boundaries and constraints on it. So, like a few quick tips for people to do that. Tell AI in the prompt what the constraints are. Here are some guidelines, be concise, use keywords, keep the output under this number of amounts. Tell it what is good results, tell it not good results. So like here I even repeat max length. I tell it the formatting, do not include quotation marks because I've seen it sometimes hallucinate that. And then the final step that I think really, there's I guess two that really, really narrow in AI is giving context for the task. I see people forget to put in system prompts all of the time because I don't think OpenAI or anyone who's done it has really explained well what a system prompt does. But the simplest explanation is that you have to imagine AI is like an all-powerful junior employee, which is an interesting contradiction to try and fathom. But it has been trained on literally all of the text, all of the stories, all of the data that we as people have generated in hundreds of years. So it can just as well talk about Socrates and the law and philosophy as it can Steve Jobs, Apple, and tech. But that actually means it's good at everything and therefore good at nothing. So when you're narrowing it down, the system prompt takes that massive corpus of knowledge and tells it, actually only access your corpus of knowledge for this specific thing. So now
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling it only focus on writing, only focus on research, only focus on data. And there's a little bit of, again, like these nitpicking things you have to do. Like my other hot take for email writing is actually don't ever mention emails in your prompts, because I think these LLMs are trained on tons and tons of what I would consider to be garbage articles optimized for SEO about cold email. And so when you write cold email into the prompt, you actually get those types of advices and techniques output versus just saying, I'm writing a sentence and here's the format that I want. And the last thing that I'll say here to just kind of narrow in the results of things, examples really, 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 I cannot say really enough times, narrow in your solution space. And this is what's called like few-shot learning or one-shot learning, where you give the AI a couple of examples of what you want it to do. And now all of a sudden it knows what good looks like in those examples. And so it will not give you variations that stray too far from that. And the more examples you give, the more fixed that output is going to be.
Yeah, this is great. This is great because I see this would also take a ton of time because you'd go to the website, you would have to then feed the prompt. Even if you had like a template, copying it, pasting it, by that time you probably could have just written it yourself. So this saves tons of time to be able to do that.
Exactly. And then without belaboring this point, right, I do something similar here for Love the Mission. I do it similar for like, give me 2 personas that this company probably sells to. And I'll come to this in just a second. That generates this final message here. Hey, Anthony, great chatting today. Love LeanScale's focus on blank and blank. Excited to hopefully help you use Clay to reach more blank and blank, where the blank parts are actually AI generated. And then last but not least, the other thing that I will eventually add in more to this, because I love like adding to this core demo flow over time. One thing I'm going to do, which is like a teaser for the future maybe, is we're going to have memes sent to people automatically using Clay about people's companies. The other thing is that I don't think it's really clear to people all the time what the power of this AI web scraper is. And so in a very meta way, what I have the AI web scraper doing here is trying to find 5 data points that we could probably get automatically using the AI web scraper that you wouldn't be able to get from a traditional data provider, which is what I sort of call the last mile of data gathering, where you still have people just manually getting data that's custom to your ICP. Maybe you're looking at law firm websites, dentist offices, practitioners, therapists, etc. That's where this tool really comes in handy. And we're generating, hey, for you guys in particular, right, the number of portfolio companies a VC firm has invested in would probably be an interesting data point for you to do your own lead generation. Same thing for AUM, same thing for revenue and growth stage of these companies. And I don't actually know a bunch of data providers that would give you these types of things, but I do know that we can prompt this AI web scraper to get that kind of data pretty reliably for you.
So this is actually really interesting because we in general use Crunchbase to target companies that just recently raised money. We're usually looking at Series A, B, sometimes C. But we also do have a list of VC firms that we target, and that first one is our number one indicator that we actually put into Crunchbase to look for VC firms we should be connecting with. And that range is actually pretty spot on because we're looking for VC firms that likely don't have really well built out operating teams because we would augment their operating team. So that's really interesting because that's exactly how we would plug this in and exactly how we would target people we're trying to partner with or people we're trying to engage with.
Yeah, so that's okay. So then this works even better than like I could imagine because like you can imagine if you got a message from me or someone like me, including that as like, hey, are these data points that you care about? That's like a level of attention and detail that I don't even know if a human would get to after an hour of looking at your website.
There's no way. There's no way. I mean, it took us internally working at LeanScale for a few years to understand like what we should be looking at. So
Yeah.
that's super powerful.
Yeah, and that it took AI a couple hundred tokens and a little bit of time from us to go figure it out. So this is where we need to work with our AI overlords, to your earlier point.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, this I think the end of this finally is that we've got leads updated and created. I mentioned that last stage, right? So if we go about the process from I find people and companies, I get more information about those people and companies, I draft messaging to those people and companies, and then I send that information to where I need it to be stored. In this case, I'm actually not sending this information to a CRM or an email sequencer, though I could. I could put it in HubSpot, Salesforce, instantly Smart Lead, Outreach. But what I'm instead doing, just because it's a little bit snazzier for demos, and this is what I often show people who just don't know anything about Clay, is you're going to get a LinkedIn message from me automatically with this text. If we're already connected, you'll still just get the message. If we aren't already connected, it'll get a connection request invite and then also send the message. And the like wow factor of people watching me explain Clay and then knowing that they didn't see me do anything on LinkedIn, but they got a message from me from just their name and company is often the aha moment for people. Because again, go back to that original problem of your BDRs are probably doing this manually, taking minutes to hours to actually do it and probably missing data in the process.
Yep.
Imagine a world in which they can spend all their time doing something else. We can just have a Clay table doing this for you, and we can do it for a bunch of other parts of the organization as well.
I love it.
Cool. So that's kind of the core demo flow. I think if it's interesting, I'm happy to show. I think I've got two other things that could be exciting. One could be deeper personalization, so giving a little bit more granularity to how to use AI in Clay. And the other one could just be a non-outreach use case, which is sort of the research gathering perspective.
I think going through some deep personalization use cases would be really, really good. And I think it's going to tie in really well with what you just showed. Um, so I'd love to see that because I think that's where the power of the data you can collect plus how you can leverage AI, like to beautifully orchestrate that, I think would be really interesting.
Let's do it. Let's jump into it. So I've got that pulled up right here. So this is sort of like an interesting fixed world example. I'm using only Clay team members just so I don't hit any data privacy concerns or issues with folks. But if you look here, we've got a very similar flow to the previous table, right? In this case, I already have data, which is information about a person and their company name. I'm still doing what I did in that previous table, where I'm finding their LinkedIn profile using this AI web scraper, and I'm grabbing information from that LinkedIn profile. Notably, and we'll come back to this in a second, what I am doing here is I'm grabbing all their past universities and all their past companies. Now, before I jump into the actual AI personalization, I think it's really important to note that AI is not going to give you magic beans, is what I often say, or give you like solutions where solutions don't exist. I think the best way to use AI is the same way that we've used all automation tools historically, which is I have to know what I'm trying to automate. I need to know the process intimately well, and then I can figure out which pieces I'm trying to automate. But if I just start from a blank slate and I'm like, I think I want to automate this thing, I will end up down a deep snake of rabbit holes and maybe never even accomplish my end objective by the end of it all. So,
Great.
yeah, if we apply that process to copywriting as well, and I see people doing this all the time again, you need to know what the structure of the email you want to write is. You cannot just tell AI, write the email like you were saying earlier, Anthony, and expect it to do a good job. So in this case, right, before I jump into the table itself, I decided I want the email structure. I found this like general template to be quite useful to have a subject line that says your insights or your expertise on blank. Because what I'm referencing is a piece of research or thought leadership that I found about this person that they may have published in a blog, done on a podcast, talked about in an article. Then I want the first line of the email to say something along the lines of, hey, Anthony, just read your blog post on scaling revenue operations for teams in the era of AI. Really loved your specific insight on quote from you in the article. I too agree with the need for RevOps to evolve as AI progresses. Then I'm going to include some template text because I don't want to really change my call to action. I'm like, hey, are you open to a chat? Here's some context on why I want to chat. Here's why I think a chat could be beneficial for you and for me. And then the last thing that I want to personalize in this email is PS, I noticed you went to the University of Virginia. One of my good friends went there. Did you ever participate in lighting of the lawn? I hear it's really beautiful around wintertime. And the reason I like this structure is because I'm reaching out to show that I've paid attention not just to the company, but to the person with the research that I'm finding. I'm asking for something very, hopefully easy, which is like a quick call. But I must show that I've done my work because calls are really hard for busier people. I'm making it worth their while and I'm making it worth my while by including the reason for that ask. And then I'm going the extra step beyond just their professional personalization and showing that I took the extra mile to try and personalize it to this individual human as a person. So So I've seen that work really well. I've seen some people it works not really well on. You just have to figure that out on your ICP. But now that I know that's the structure of the email that I want to write, I can start to work backwards from there. Thing number one that I need is that research. So let's use the AI web scraper again here to try and find that research for all these people. You can sort of see a quick prompt here. You can see how in-depth this gets. I actually am still making improvements to this prompt every day, which I think is the process of iteration in any sort of automation game. But you find a blog, an interview, an article for all these things. Here's where they've worked before. Here's what I don't want you to do. Make sure that you do this. Here's some of the steps that I want you to take. Then once you've done all that, only return the result and nothing else. And I also like this little prompt engineering hack at the end. Tell it, especially for an agent-based model, because it might repeat steps multiple times, to maximize its effort, to tell people how important this thing is. And right, if you want to go the other direction on minimizing cost, etc., you could do so in like the run settings, or actually if you were using your own API key, you could do that. At this, it's fixed at 3 credits because you're using our API key. So now that research goes and finds thoughts, it won't find it for everyone. Not everyone in the world has thought leadership available on the internet, but I've created a list where at least a vast majority of people have something. Then we're doing something very similar to the last table I showed, but we're going way more in depth. I'm now scraping the thought leadership instead of the company homepage, because there's a lot more meat on the thought leadership page. Now, the one thing I will note that I'm still working on here is YouTube. I actually need to get an extra step in here to try to transcript what that YouTube video is about. You'll notice here, like in line 10, this is not actually what I wanted to talk about, like key policies and creators, although it might be for Bruno. So we'll have to come back to that in just a second. Then I think what's really important is coming back to that AI sentence by sentence approach. And what I'll show you guys is a kind of a prompting technique for doing this. Right? Below is the subject line. The subject line is actually relatively simple. Notice I'm giving it the system prompt, and I can give it even examples if I wanted to in here, but we've got examples haven't come yet to the Anthropic integration, so we'll add those over time. I personally like Anthropic more for creative copywriting at this moment in time. Talk to me again in 3 to 6 months and we'll see.
I know it's changing so fast, but
exactly, right? Like literally, I think 3 months ago, if you'd asked me that, I would have said GPT 4 actually. And now we've got 4.0 and then 4.0 versus Opus. And I'm sure in 3 to 6 months time, we'll be talking about 5. And who knows what they'll call it, DaVinci maybe, or actually not that, because that was previous OpenAI, but you get the point.
Yep.
What I like about this though, and this is I think a unique thing that comes from Clay as well, is you can sort of start to like build your total email, but doing it line by line, providing that line by line context to each call. So for example, in here, I'm writing the email first line, and this is very detailed, right? It has all the same elements I've been hammering before, which is the context, the negative consideration criteria, the positive consideration criteria, the tone, some examples. And then I also include here's the previous sentence. Make sure the sentence is unique and additive, not repetitive, so that I don't end up getting the same thing said twice. There's a lot of different context really jammed into this prompt. And then the last thing that I'll really hammer home here, notice nowhere in this prompt have I said the words cold email. That's important, because when I was doing this with cold email, I was getting some like very salesy kind of jargon and garbage. And so I'm just saying right sentences.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is going to be making this sound and feel authentic,
Exactly.
while still automating it. And I think this is the most impressive roadmap of prompt engineering that I've seen in a platform. So it's just really intuitive, but also very guided to make sure that you set this up correctly.
Yeah, and I think we can even be doing a better job of that, right? Like I think right now we leave people sort of to the wolves in this integration, but we'll be building even more ways to direct people how to write these types of things here.
Nice.
So yeah, I think then I'm not going to go through every single one because that will probably bore everyone, but just to give you an example here, right? I keep telling it, you're crafting an email, not a cold email, which is fine, line by line. Here's the subject line, here's the first line. And now we're writing the next subject. Then here's some examples. Then we do this. And so I think to your point, Anthony, what's great about this whole thing, so I'm doing this for every single part of the personalized bits, which is the beginning of the email, and then that PS line at the end. I'm extracting undergrad from all their universities. I'm doing some research to figure out a unique tradition at that university, and then I'm crafting that PS line. Did you ever take part in this blank? So then I am able to put all of those sentences together into a final actual email. And I think oftentimes what I advise teams to do is actually not just trust this to send immediately, but instead of a process where you have BDRs again, just going in dark to a CRM like email person contact, at least let's automate the relevant research, because you know what kinds of research work well if you've been around for long enough as an organization. At least let's automate the generation of an idea of the way that someone is going to outreach. Because if they're not writing fully custom email for every single person, which I don't know a BDR or an SDR in the world who does that, then there's some sort of template that we can at least get them started with it, because it's a hell of a lot easier to edit 100 emails that are like not quite perfect, but somewhat right, than it is write 100 emails from scratch. So like, let's take, for example, here, this is Kareem, our CEO and founder. Hi, Kareem, just read your interview on aligning founder psychology with the business on the First Round podcast. Loved this line in particular. A company is the reflection of its founder personality. Your insights on building culture intentionally really resonated with me. Long shot, would you be open to a chat? This is template. This is template. This is template. P.S. Noticed you went to McGill. Did you ever take part in the Wild Faculty Olympics and Carnival? One of my best friends loved it there. And then we have the subject line here, right? Your insights on finding product market fit. And I can see this kind of personalized to each different person here. So here's Zona, just read your internal memo on credit rollover and top-ups on the company blog. Here's the line I loved in particular: it's the right thing to do for customers. Customer needs is always the right approach. Template, template, template. P.S. Noticed you went to Yale. Did you ever get tapped to join a secret society your junior year? One of my best friends loved it there.
Yeah, and maybe that one needs like one quick change, but
that one needs an edit there, right? Like, I don't know if you want to ask about a secret society in the last line.
Yeah, are you part of Skull and Bones or Illuminati? Which one?
Yeah, exactly. And like, this is what I sort of mean by, I think people, when they go into using AI tools, are expecting perfection to start. And this comes back to just a systems and process mindset on how you implement automation. I'm not expecting anything over the scale of a few dozen or a few hundred to be fully perfected. So I think the like best processes start with, hey, let's automate parts of the process and still have a really rigorous human in the loop at the end. And then the best processes will actually surface all those edge cases back to the prompt engineer. So let's say, for example, we're automating all this outreach generation for OpenAI. And they still have BDRs going down and trimming the final messages. Every time a message is actually 100% perfect, they just mark a checkbox next to the message. Anytime a message needs to be edited, they mark a different checkbox, and then they actually paste the edited text into a different cell. So now the person building the system can actually look at all the messages for a given week and say, okay, here are the areas in which it's actually not generating the right things. Here's now how I have to update our prompt in order to actually make this incrementally better week over week. So that the goal then, or the metric for the process, doesn't become out the gate, how many automated emails are we sending? The metric becomes how many automated emails make it through our BDR's test. And it should go from 60 to 70 to 100 to 120. And then you probably will reach some sort of natural cap or limit at some point.
Yeah, well, even just the level of quality though. So, and I have that same philosophy, which I think is just a truth at this point. Figure out the process first, then automate. Technology is not going to solve your problems. It's just going to help your solutions. And I think in this case, though, it also increases quality by doing this research that people wouldn't have time to do or wouldn't do. So I just think it's unbelievably impressive, the amount of depth, how specific you can get with the prompts, and then like this is a great outreach. This is something that I would likely feel compelled to respond to if somebody sent this to me. And I get all kinds of messages all day long, but it's like, okay, sounds, yeah, you did your work. So you earned the right to ask for a quick chat. So I'll at least read down in the next one. If it's somewhat remotely something I'm interested in, like I'll give it a shot. So I
Yep.
think it's just really impressive being able to pull that all together in one workflow.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll add to what you're saying is that when sometimes I show people this flow and they're like, oh, but I can tell that that's AI generated. I'm like, could you really? Because I've modeled this after like an approach I used to take manually in a pre-AI era, and I used to get compliments on those emails all the time from people in like the C-suite of like, hey, wow, I don't normally respond to these types of emails, but thank you for doing the work. And you like one person even told me I stroked his ego in just the right way, which I thought was interesting but valid feedback. And so I actually have also made, and we can like send this to you if you're curious, like a quick form. It's a very fun little test. It's like 10 questions. Is this email AI or not AI? And I have yet to have a single person actually score 100 on it. We've had some people come close, but I think people often bias towards what they think they can tell is AI just when they see the process of it being made versus what they would actually think when they receive it.
Well, what would you write anyway? I mean, if you had all this information at your fingertips, how would you write it in a more authentic way?
Right. And like maybe there is valid feedback there, right? But then the whole point is that if you can figure out what the better approach is and there's still a formula or a template to it, we can then systematize that version of what you would do. Like it's entirely customizable to you.
Right. I love
Yeah.
it.
Perfect. And that's everything I've got sort of on the deep personalization side. I'm happy to jump into a totally non-outreach related use case if we want to do that. I also know we're coming up on time. So one other thing that I think went relatively viral recently that I think it might be cool to show. We at the company have focused a lot on the outreach use case because the outreach use case is the main entry point into conversations for teams. And it's also one of the most important things that's top of mind for people today because
Yep.
sales teams aren't performing as well, revenue's going down, people are struggling to meet quota. You've seen everyone's posts on LinkedIn. So Clay has become branded this sort of like outreach tool, and I think people really come to it for outreach. But at its crux, what we've actually built are the components of just really effective fluid data automation, really geared towards customer teams, broadly speaking. And so I think there's lots of non-traditional, and traditional just being the arbitrary thing we defined it as, use cases for Clay. And I'm going to show you guys one of those that's still sales related today. So here we had a talk with John Barrows, which some of you may or may not know. John is one of my favorite people, or JB as some people call him. He has been doing the sales thing for a long time. He is also on top of the better trends and how to think about augmenting your people and your teams with sales. He's trained reps at huge companies. If you look at his banner, right? Like Google, Salesforce, LinkedIn, Zoom. He just really, really knows the enterprise process like bread and butter. And I think is an incredible coach, knows the tactics to perform really well, and knows how to strategically analyze a team's output really well. So we were talking to John about what he does, who he does it with, and how his process currently works. There was a video he had posted a few months ago that also went viral. It was him walking through his 30 to 60-minute process he does every morning for his tier 1 accounts. And so what John does is he still manually pulls up someone who is a dream prospect at a dream company every morning at 9 or 10 a.m. And he does a bunch of research about that person. He finds the company fundraising, the news. He figures out their previous work experience. Have they worked at a company that he's serviced before? Because that might give him an in. And then he gathers all that research into one document that he walks through in 30 minutes on this video, and then manually writes the email or the message using all the research that he's gathered. And so what we proposed to John was, hey, John, love the research process. You're thinking about it the right way. What if we could just automatically gather and create all that information for you into one clean, neat document? And so John was like, if you can do that, amazing, try it. And that's exactly what we did. So you can see this post here and how we sort of did it with John. And then I'm going to jump in and actually walk through. And I can even send you guys the link to the guide on how this doc works actually afterwards, because I built it for him to share with people. Uh, at a video level, at a high level, all John does is he comes in here and he just copy pastes the LinkedIn URL into the table. He likes it. For some reason, you could also just do it using the Chrome extension from someone's LinkedIn profile. And then the rest of this table gets kicked off automatically. There's a lot of things that I could cover in more depth that I've covered in sort of the other videos or on other talks here. But at a high level, we're pulling information from LinkedIn, finding recent posts on LinkedIn, pinging. This is an important feature that I think makes Clay really exciting, the HTTP API. If we don't have a native integration with the tool, you can still access any API using the raw get put post requests. So we're pinging Crystal knows. We're grabbing all this personality information about this individual. They're a DI, they're an initiator. Here's the overview, 3 things to do, 3 things to not do. We have previous company information for the last 3 companies that this person worked at, job titles, all the company information. For John in particular, he really spent a lot of time training Salesforce, so he looks for people with previous experience at Salesforce. The size of their sales team, which you can see here, maybe is more effective than in that initial demo because these large companies do have people with these job titles in these roles. And then we find the company's top 3 competitors. We find the websites of those competitors. We find any press releases for the company, articles of the top 3 press releases, most recent, and their topics. And then you were actually mentioning Crunchbase. We get some information from Crunchbase on what's available on the public website. And then we send everything to a Zap, which I am happy to cover more in depth at another point in time as well. Like I said, there's also like a whole Notion page that I can send along with this that details all of this more in depth. And then that Zap takes all of this information just to show it to you that we've gathered now, that John was previously copy pasting, Google searching, doing manually. Takes company, like there's literally maybe 24 data points in this entire output, probably more. It sends it all to the Zap because all I'm doing now is creating a Google Doc, which Zapier is actually better suited to do. But now imagine I can unlock anything with Zapier using Clay just to form the data layer. And then Zapier goes ahead, it creates the Google Doc, and it actually sends a Slack message to a channel when it comes back to Clay, notifying me that the doc has been created. So for example, if I come in here and I go to JB Clay, or sorry, I think it's summary. Yeah. I get to, and the fun part of this too is I get to see John using the automation over and over again as well. And so if I come here to see the full doc, this is what gets created every time he uses our table. You can see it's a document. It's already got the person's name, the company, the website, the industry, about us, hyperlinked competitor URLs, his profile here. Let's just check it. Yep, that is Oscar Franco at Splunk. You can see all the previous companies, his latest LinkedIn posts, the bio, relevant research. Here's 3 articles. Here's the hyperlinks to all those articles. And so now John still does the manual writing, and one day I've convinced him maybe he'll do a little bit of AI generation for that as well. But that 30 to 60 minutes he spends gathering all this information, we've cut down to 5 seconds.
If I could just like show the mind blown emoji right now, that's my reaction to it. That is absolutely insane. And not just it's like look at how many systems you had to interact with in order to make this happen, and the amount of time and how much research you'd have to do, and then to just compile it and then get a Slack of like, hey, here's someone you might be interested in talking to. Here you go. That's just insane. That's insane. I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want to be doing this in any sales capacity. So that's just incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. It's what we try and strive for here.
Yeah.
Well, Yash, I knew that meeting with you today would definitely deliver the level of excitement that I was looking for. I mean it. There's no other technology in the go-to-market space that is doing what you guys are doing. And I could not personally be more excited about what you're building, what you're doing, and how you've done it. And I think it's just such an elegant way to bring AI in a no-code way to people who could really, really leverage it in a meaningful way. I know this isn't going to be the last one we do because there's so much to show. I'd really, really love to connect again and get some more, specific use cases that inspire that creativity that I know you're trying to do. And then just keep following everything you're building. I can't wait. I mean, if this is where you guys are at today and it feels like you're just getting started, I'm just so optimistic and so excited for what the future holds for Clay.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. And we've talked about this a little bit. Like, I think I can maybe tease it on this video, but we're working on a whole suite of features that deal with more dynamic intent data. So now imagine that in the processes of everything that I showed you, we can now also access website visits, G2 visits, trust radius visits. So I can look at whether or not someone has demonstrated intent as the other source of starting that conversation. I can also look at maybe a list of champions that I have at my existing customers and clients. When one of them changes their jobs, I should be following them to their next company. And I should make them feel valued and heard and respected. So like being able to send someone, I actually know a company that's doing this with us right now, swag, or like a thank you gift for everything you've done at your previous company, hoping you'll take us with you to your next company. That kind of stuff in the moment when it matters is like the next era of Clay that we're kind of shepherding in. And then there's a whole bunch of things that I'm excited for us to sort of share and jam through that are not even in this space, right? Like what's possible with all that data if you just get even more creative about the ways that you could use AI. So we'll tease with plenty of things to come.
Amazing. Yash, thank you so much for the time today, and I can't wait to get you back on. I appreciate it.
Likewise. All right. Good chatting, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.